You think levitation is a cartoon miracle, something pre-scientific people made up because they didn't understand physics. A legend that grew over centuries until nobody could separate fact from folklore. Except Joseph of Cupertino was flying in the 1600s, the same century that gave us the scientific method. Galileo was alive, Shakespeare was writing, and a simple-minded friar in Italy was floating to the ceiling during Mass in front of hundreds of witnesses who wrote it down in legal depositions. Kings saw it, queens saw it. Church investigators sent specifically to disprove it, saw it, and couldn't. This is not ancient mythology. This is documented history, and the Catholic Church tried hard to make it go away. Here's what breaks the normal story. Joseph wasn't special. He failed his seminary exams multiple times. He was considered intellectually slow by his peers. The Church almost rejected him entirely. He had seizures. He was clumsy. He forgot things. The man could barely read Latin, and yet God chose him to receive the most public and most undeniable miracle gift in modern religious history. Not a private vision, not a healing that could be explained away. Flying in front of crowds, dozens of times, for 35 years. Why would God give the most spectacular gift to the least spectacular person? That's the question that unravels everything you think you know about how God chooses people. We're going to walk through the evidence first. Then, we're going to show you what it actually means. And by the end, you'll understand why this matters more to your life right now than almost anything else you'll hear this year. Joseph was born in 1,603 inches, Cupertino, Italy. His father died before he was born. His mother resented him. She called him slow, useless, a mouth to feed she couldn't afford. When he was 8, she apprenticed him to a shoemaker just to get him out of the house. He tried to join the Franciscans at 17. They rejected him. Not holy enough. He tried the Capuchins. They accepted him as a lay brother, but kicked him out 8 months later because he kept dropping things and forgetting tasks. He was that unimpressive. Finally, a Franciscan convent accepted him out of pity because his uncle was a friar there. They gave him the worst jobs, stable work, kitchen duty. He still messed up constantly, but he prayed. Hours and hours alone in the chapel, and that's when it started. During prayer, he would go rigid, his eyes would roll back, and he would lift off the ground, just a few inches, at first, then higher. The other friars saw it and didn't know what to do. So they did what the church always does when something breaks the system. They investigated. The church sent examiners in 1628, educated men, skeptics by training. Their job was to find the trick, expose the fraud, protect the faithful from superstition. They watched Joseph for weeks. They saw him levitate during Mass, not once, multiple times. He would hear sacred music and suddenly shoot upward like gravity stopped applying to him. He flew from the altar to the tabernacle. He flew into trees in the garden. One time, he flew over the heads of the congregation and landed on the high altar. The examiners wrote depositions, legal documents. They used words like observed and witnessed and undeniable. They could not explain it. So the church did something you would not expect. They ordained him. In 1628, Joseph became a priest. But they had a problem. He kept flying in public. It caused chaos. People would flock to see him. Crowds, disruption. The church doesn't like disruption. So they started moving him, convent to convent, trying to keep it quiet, but word spread anyway. And that's when the royalty started showing up. In 1645, the Spanish ambassador to the Pope brought his wife to see Joseph. She was suffering and wanted a blessing. Joseph went into ecstasy the moment she entered. He flew. She fainted. In 1657, a German duke visited specifically to investigate the flying friar rumors. He was a Protestant, a skeptic. He watched Joseph levitate during benediction and converted to Catholicism on the spot. He wrote about it extensively. Even the Pope's own theologians came. They saw it, documented it. And here's what makes this impossible to dismiss. Joseph had no control over when it happened. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't calculated. Sometimes it happened during the most inconvenient moments. He would be serving Mass and suddenly lift off. The other priests had to grab his robes and pull him down. Once he flew so high, they needed a ladder to bring him back. Another time, he was in the garden and the name of the Virgin Mary was mentioned. He screamed in ecstasy and flew into an olive tree, got stuck in the branches. They had to help him down like a rescued cat. This was not a man seeking attention. This was a man humiliated by a gift he could not control. And the church's response? They locked him away. For the last 10 years of his life, Joseph was kept in isolation. Forbidden from celebrating public mass, forbidden from eating with the other friars, hidden from visitors. The Inquisition investigated him. Twice. Not because they thought he was faking, but because they didn't know if the levitation came from God or from something else. He died in 1663, alone, misunderstood. The miracle that should have made him famous instead made him a prisoner. So here's the question you have to sit with. Why would God give a man a gift that caused him so much suffering? Why give the most public miracle to someone who didn't want public attention? Why choose the man everyone considered too simple to matter? And why does the church that claims to believe in miracles get so uncomfortable when one actually happens? The answer is not what you think. And it cuts to the core of everything wrong with how we understand calling and qualification and who God actually uses. Joseph couldn't control the flying because the flying wasn't the point. The point was the surrender. God didn't choose Joseph despite his simplicity. He chose him because of it. Joseph had nothing to prove, no reputation to protect, no ego to manage. When he prayed, he wasn't performing. He wasn't trying to impress God or earn favor or climb a spiritual ladder. He just loved completely, without calculation. And God responded to that love in the most dramatic way possible to show the rest of us what he values. Not intelligence, not competence, not the ability to pass tests or impress committees. Absolute surrender. The world sees a man who failed his exams and calls him unqualified. God sees a man with no barriers between his heart and heaven and makes him fly. That's the scandal. God doesn't wait for you to be impressive. He doesn't wait for you to have it all together. He doesn't wait for you to be smart enough or holy enough or worthy enough. He takes the ones the world overlooks, the ones who failed, the ones who barely made it in the door, and he does impossible things through them specifically to prove that the power is his and not theirs. Joseph flew because Joseph was empty, and God fills empty vessels. First, stop waiting to be qualified. You will never feel ready. You will never have enough training or enough confidence or enough proof that you're the right person. If God waited for perfect people, nothing would ever happen. He uses the willing, not the qualified. Joseph didn't wake up one day suddenly capable. He woke up willing to pray, even though he felt like an idiot. That's the threshold. Willingness. Second, recognize that your weakness is not disqualifying. It's the point. Paul said, God's power is made perfect in weakness, not hidden by weakness, not despite weakness, perfected in it. Your failures are not evidence that God can't use you. They're evidence that when he does use you, nobody will be able to credit you for it. They'll have to credit him. That's why Joseph flew, and the brilliant theologians didn't. God wanted to make it obvious where the power was coming from. Third, understand that the gift may not look like you think it should. Joseph didn't want to fly. It terrified him. It embarrassed him. It got him locked away. But it accomplished what God wanted to accomplish. It shattered every assumption about who gets miracles and why. Your calling may not feel like a blessing. It may feel like a burden you didn't ask for. Do it anyway. God knows what he's doing even when you don't. They canonized Joseph in 1767, over 100 years after his death. The church that spent his entire life trying to hide him eventually admitted he was a saint, because the evidence was undeniable. Hundreds of witnesses, decades of documented levitations, a simple man who loved God and flew. But here's what stays with you. Joseph didn't fly because he was special. He flew because he was surrendered, and that's available to you. Not the levitation, but the surrender that makes God move. You don't need to be brilliant. You don't need to be impressive. You don't need to have passed all the tests. You just need to be willing, empty, available. God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. Joseph of Cupertino literally flew during Mass, not because he earned it, because he emptied himself enough to receive it. Stop waiting for permission. You already have it.